You'll no doubt have heard the arguments before in Hong Kong with regards to the rising house prices, the oligopolies, the caged housing. Stick with me and I'll explain to you the very reason why these problems occurred and what eventually led to that of the Umbrella Revolution. First, understand that Hong Kong was a very different place before 1997 to after 97.
And we'll be down here all week as we approach the 20th anniversary of the handover of Hong Kong to China. And over the next few days, we'll explore how the city has changed since 1997 and the issues affecting the people of Hong Kong in the years to come. Now, Hong Kong is one of the most expensive places to live in the world. Housing prices have jumped almost 80% in the last 20 years.
And so it's important to make the distinguishing difference between the two periods in Hong Kong's history. If you go back to the 1950s, in 1950 Hong Kong had an average household income of less than 5,000, and round about by 97 it had an average household income of more than $37,000 plus. It's become one of the richest cities in the world. It didn't happen for nothing. However, problems began to rise as more and more government interference came around with regards to Hong Kong, is that it was a tiny spit of land bordering that of a communist country where Hong Kong could not trade through that of China's border. There was only one place that Hong Kong could trade, and that was through its harbour. That makes it every bit more special, however, to how a tiny small fishing village with practically no natural resources became one of the richest cities in the world. The difference is the lease came to an end in 1997. British government before 97 was extremely limited to what it could do in Hong Kong. It was extremely, free from that of government's intervention, and its economy thrived and prospered. But it doesn't change the underlying reality that in this time period, and even still to this day, people from China were trying to escape China for better life in Hong Kong. With regards to the population increase, it was causing a problem because there's a higher demand for housing to the ratio of what's being built. Now, because it's only a tiny spit of land, the only way that Hong Kong could build its housing is by landfill. What that simply means is it would have to fill in land that's underwater in order to make it level to build housing. And because the government owns the land and leases the property, it very much restricted the marketplace from growing and expanding so that the supply of housing could keep up with the demand from the population increase. Remember, they faced that great famine and the great leap forward in China in and around 1960, and millions of people lost their lives due to starvation, etc. It was very, desperate period of history for that of China, and you can understand why they were trying to escape. Many of the people who were trying to escape China for that of Hong Kong, for better life, they knew that Hong Kong was living more prosperously. However, they faced the economic reality that they would end up in the caged housing because they could not afford the more expensive housing. This is because, again, the supply of housing in Hong Kong could not keep up with the large influx from the immigration, from those escaping for better life.
An average family now pays 19 times the money it makes in a year just to afford a home. And many of these flats are tiny. Now, the government predicts 4 out of every 10 new apartments built next year will be smaller than 430 square feet.
But it tells you something, that these people would rather live in these caged houses over and above than living under the oppressive regime under communism in China. They risked their lives for that. They knew what they were getting themselves into. But what is important to note is the fact that before 1997, the caged housing was rapidly in decline. Many of you will have heard the argument on the Kowloon walled city, even some who argue on Somalia. They love to try and pin the blame off onto the free market and say, well, here's the example of free market capitalism with the caged housing, and this is why you should avoid Hong Kong. With regards to the free market economy. But there lies the problem, because the Kowloon walled city was not owned by Hong Kong. It wasn't even owned by China. It was very much anarchist. And then they may use the argument and say, well, anarchy, there's your free market for you. But again, it doesn't work like that, because they use the same argument with Somalia. You require the rule of law and secure private property rights, which was not present in the likes of Somalia or even the Kowloon Walled City. The Kowloon Walled City, Hong Kong and China both came to an agreement to demolish it for the sake of human rights and the dire poverty that they were living in. And so eventually it was demolished. But what's important to note from this is that the caged housing in Hong Kong was rapidly in decline before 1997. As more and more government intervention would come around, not only would you see a vast increase in house pricing, you would see the things stagnate with regards to the caged housing. After Hong Kong was handed back to that of China, when British rule came to an end in 97, when the lease came to an end, there was a mass influx of immigration caused by the government. As a result of that, as if things weren't bad enough as it was with regards to immigration, you could just imagine with the high demand coming in for housing and the supply couldn't keep up. This is the very reason why costs spiraled out of control with regards to housing. And so those who were escaping for better life in Hong Kong could only find that of what they could afford, and that being the caged housing. And through the government's intervention, not only did you see things stagnate with regards to the caged housing and the rise of housing prices, you began to see more and more problems. And this is where the oligopolies became more and more present through government's intervention. So Hong Kong today is corporatism light, so to speak. It's not really a free market today, unfortunate as it is. I think even in 2010 they saw the minimum wage law imposed, and you've just been seeing more and more problems occur. But what you can find is that the mentality of people in Hong Kong could sense that more and more of their freedom was being taken away from them. Because when you when you go through the experience of having a taste of that freedom, and they had, and you begin to see more and more of that being taken away, well, that's the very reason why you saw the umbrella revolution, because of the intervention from government. You can't really say they have a democracy, so to speak. And the way things are today in their economy, it's a ticking time bomb with regards to China. I hope that this gives you a better insight into Hong Kong and gives you a clearer picture. In order for them to build more housing, they need to landfill, and if it's the government that owns the land, if it's the government that essentially leases the property, it's the government that's in the way from allowing the free market to expand and grow housing quicker in the market so it can keep up with that of the demand. Had it been left down to a free market with regards to the land and the property, then you would see a very big difference in Hong Kong. It's just the economic reality that government's intervention has restricted that, and that's the very reason why they're faced with those problems.